Yeah, all good, all good. I had a bit of a chaotic morning. I don't know if anyone's used the trains uh, in our lovely country today, but they are slightly manic. So I think I spent the first 5 hours of today getting from London to Stoke with many delayed trains and cancelled trains. So it's a slightly frustrating morning,
Yeah.
but I'm in the office now.
Um, could you give us a brief background of Carse Waterman? Didn't the company start where you were at uni?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So, um, so to sort of introduce myself, I'm Dan Waterman, company director, founder of Carse Waterman. We are an animation, visual effects, and games company based in Stoke-on-Trent, and we have been running for somewhere between 14 and 15 years. Um, and so we've sort of been doing this for many years, and we set up the company in between our first and second year of university. When I say I'm speaking about myself and my business partner Gary Carse, who I met sort of day one of university, and sort of we ended up going on a pretty epic journey to creating a company, learning how to run a company, and sort of being sat here today.
Is there any sort of major projects that you've worked on with Carse Waterman?
I mean, there's been quite a few in different areas. I think I think we've sort of over the years we've measured success in various ways, and so like to some people, I'll work on something like Inside Number Nine for the BBC, visual effects work we did for that. Series 6, that was for Inside Number Nine, Anton Deck Saturday Night Takeaway. I'm trying to think what else. Keith and Paddy's Picture Show, Channel 4. So we've done various things for BBC, Sky One, Channel 4, ITV. And I think they're probably the sort of most high profile things we've done.
Yeah.
I think sort of what maybe our sort of more personal achievements, the ones that I think we're sort of proudest of actually are projects that haven't seen the light of day yet. They're one of the goals of our company in the long term is creating a studio that creates its own IP. It's all well and good working on other people's stories, but we really want to develop our own, and so I think probably for about 8 years now have been involved with a project, working title The Bears, and it's sort of three CG teddy bears within the sort of the protagonists of the film, and we've been working with the sort of producer on that for many years now, and some of the stuff we've created for that has been really really cool, and there's some really ongoing exciting conversations with that, but it just takes a long time to actually put the finance together to try and get these things moving. The other things we've worked on, worked with another producer to create our first kids animated TV show. And it's a 22-minute episode called Gauntlet Brim Reaper, and it's a really really exciting episode for a potential kids TV show. And again, we're sort of having various conversations with different broadcasters and to see what future that show might have. And there's been some complexities around that show and getting it made, but we're sort of we're still having conversations that sort of could be fruitful. And there's been a few other different TV shows and films that we've sort of been in the running for that we're trying to sort of get under our belt. And then sort of I guess what the your listeners will probably be more interested in is last year we made our first game using Unreal Engine, which is something we're really proud of, considering sort of as a studio we'd sort of never really been looking into games territory. And then last year we made our first, called Frame Escape, and it's still in sort of testing phase, but it's sort of relatively final, and so we're hoping we'll be able to put that online at some point soon.
Awesome. Speaking of projects, we've seen that you've been working on a AR and ADHD foundation. What was that like?
Yeah, so it was really exciting actually. I think one of the things about being a company in Stoke-on-Trent is that it's really we find people can be quite snobby and make assumptions about the type of company we are. Like people tend to make the assumption that the good companies are going to be based in London or Manchester, and that's something that we really pride ourselves of being based in Stoke. We've got a great team creating really high quality stuff, to the point where BBC or ITV or Channel 4 will trust us on working on this content. And so for us to be trusted by an organisation as big as the ADHD Foundation to create an app to support their Umbrellas installation, which is an installation that travels around the country, promoting sort of various elements of the spectrum of neurodiversity, including ADHD, was a massive opportunity for us to showcase what we can do within Carse Waterman and what comes out of Stoke. The app itself, relatively a simple app in some capacity. It's a small trail in the city centre of Stoke that's probably going to be replicated throughout the country as the Umbrellas move around the country. But it is a trail that people go around and find the different characters, unlock them, and then each character that was created by local young people from the YMCA, they come to life, and you learn a bit about the particular sort of neurodiverse condition that they have. So it's sort of taking the augmented reality stuff that people enjoyed from something like Pokemon Go and sort of applying it to something with a bit more of an educational focus.
Awesome. Yeah, we're our company is based in Stoke-on-Trent as well, so it's a big inspiration for that. But we also know that you started to break into the games industry via the Staffordshire Digital Innovation Partnership. What was that process like?
The SDIPs. It was great. It was a massive opportunity for us. We've been playing around with Unreal in the office previously. We could see that kids TV was starting to use Unreal for content generation. We were seeing different TV shows coming out that were just being churned out, so to speak, in Unreal, using the sort of real-time sort of rendering that Unreal offers. And so we started to get our head around Unreal when we had the time. I think, was it last Christmas? Last Christmas, or maybe it's 2 Christmases ago. Yeah, it was 2 Christmases ago. We did an R&D project where we sort of said we're going to create a full animation in Unreal Engine. It's not software we'd used previously to that. Some of the team had experience of Game Engine, but it was a game engine called CryEngine, and so it was this was new to us, and so we've been playing around with it, and we saw the SDIPs come along, which was Staffordshire University's grant to try and help local innovation. And I think one of the key areas that SDIPs was looking to support was they wanted to see products created that help local council achieve something that they're currently struggling to achieve. And so we put proposals together saying that we want to try and use gamification to create a resource that will effectively help signpost and educate a bit around the animation, visual effects, and games industry. and so we were successful in the bid and ended up creating a sort of gamified piece around how games are made, and so I guess the concept of the game was a bit like the film Jumanji, in the sense of you play someone that comes to do work experience at our office. As you arrive, you get sucked into one of our computer screens, and you get stuck in a game that hasn't been finished yet. So you have to go through the game and fix it as you go along to get to the end and get out of the game. And so we sort of replicated basic sort of 3D processes in the game to try and sort of showcase simple things like moving objects around in a 3D space, texturing, lighting, concept art, all of that sort of stuff within the game. And so it's primarily it's a game, and it's meant to be fun, and the challenges are built as puzzles. The secondary element is the education, which was something we thought was really important when building it, because for us, no one wants to play a game that's going to be too education heavy. You know, people want to play games that are games. They want to be fun. So, you know, thankfully, Staffs Uni were sort of keen to follow our lead on that and let us pretty much do what we wanted to do. It was a big success. And you know, after that, we sort of got into sort of looking for funding for our next game that we're looking to do. And as you say, you guys are based in Stoke as well. You know, you'll know that, you know, these things aren't easy to try and find someone to invest in these projects, and you have to work hard. And you know, the great thing about SDIPS is that it gave us another opportunity to sort of add another string to our bow, so to speak, and a bit more proof of what we can deliver. And so it helped us, as the funding likes to call it, help us create a new product. Sort of, and that's ultimately what it was. It helped us create a new product which we can offer, which is the game side of things.
Awesome. So that new game that you're trying to get funding for, is that your own IP?
It will be, yeah, it will be. So the game that we're currently looking to develop at the moment is taking lessons from games like Civilization, as well as that stuff like Battlefield and Assassin's Creed, in the way that all of those games look at history. And we're sort of applying that to something slightly more similar to something like Link's Awakening or Animal Crossing. So we're creating something that's sort of around heritage and history, but going for that more of a Nintendo style feel with it. And it's very, very early stages with that at the moment, and we've got basically a 100-page sort of draft of how, you know, the narrative of the game, the mechanics, the characters, some of the side characters, and the locations and everything. And we've just got a massive document that just has everything that we've sort of created for it there. And as I say, we're in the process of trying to sort of put that funding piece together.
Awesome. So we know that you're a huge animation company, and you're starting to work in the games industry. Is there a difference between animation for games in terms of film and TV? Is there a difference between those two?
There is and there isn't. I think that, you know, there is a difference in the sense of, you know, you're going to be looking to create sort of more loopable animations for games. You know, you're not necessarily, unless you're creating sort of largely cutscenes, you don't tend to be creating I guess sort of high-end sort of character animations. It's slightly more broad, it's slightly more loose, and there's a and you know, whenever you're working on these projects, you know, it's always about efficiency and making sure you're not sort of using time to animate something you're not going to see. And so with games, you sort of can get away with when your character's running around, slightly less detail in the animation, whereas with you're looking at something and it's going to be sort of a narrative piece, let's say for an advert or for a film or TV show, your focus is going to be on the sort of key areas that the film is sort of, I guess, guiding your attention to. So you have to make sure that high end animation is there, and it's that ultimately the performance is there. And so I think that there is a difference, but I think the fundamentals of animation are the same. And if you can animate for film, you'll be able to apply that to sort of the mythology of games. I mean, there are other elements that sort of take a bit of transferring over, but overall, our industry is full of problem solvers, and that sort of process of transferring over isn't particularly complicated.
Yeah. So what were your first steps into getting your company up and running?
It's a very odd story. So I was 21, Gary was 20. We were at university in our first year. I was a Pixar fanboy, so I was studying 3D animation. Gary was an Aardman fanboy, so he was studying sort of stop motion. And we ended up meeting on our first day. And I ended up pretty quickly realizing animation wasn't for me. My animation sucked. And I sort of had to think on my feet quite quickly as to sort of, well, what am I going to do? I'm on an animation course. I'm not great at actually moving the characters about. What would work for me? And luckily enough, Gary was really good at the animation. He's really talented. Been doing it for a few years, just animating with plasticine, stop motion, and I pushed Gary to learn the 3D side of it as well, because that was what I wanted to work in. And so Gary was sort of animating stuff. I was doing a bit of modeling here, a bit of lighting, a bit of rendering. I was interested in motion capture, and so together we sort of managed to create a full pipeline and started just working on projects together. And then I think probably about 6 months into our first year of university, Gary ended up being invited to his old college in Newcastle upon Tyne, because that's where Gary's from. He's a Geordie. So he went up to Newcastle upon Tyne to his old college, and he ended up meeting another sort of visiting lecturer who was up there for the day, someone who was called Corinne Hardy. Corinne worked for an agency down in London for part of the time, and it was just a sort of a chance meeting. They didn't know each other beforehand. A very chance meeting. He happened to see some of the work we were doing at university, and a few months later, Corinne ended up phoning us saying, "Hey, I remember seeing your work at this event in Newcastle upon Tyne College. Got a project that's come along. I really want to get some high-end animation for it, but Aardman are far too expensive for the budget we have. Would we be up for animating it?" And it ended up being a music video for The Prodigy. And so we sort of we were just incredibly lucky that our approach of just going out there and meeting as many people as possible, because we really wanted to try and get people to fund projects for us, and we were trying to sort of sell animation, and we never quite expected our first big project to come from just Gary going back to his old college, but ultimately that was how it started. And so we were the first year animation students who'd animated a music video for The Prodigy. It was a song called Warriors Dance. And the music video was a bunch of cigarette packets to life in a bar and having a massive rave. And it was a really cool video. And we look back now, and it was we were learning, and there are certain rough parts of it that we'll sort of see every time we watch it. There are certainly some mistakes in there that I don't think even the director spotted at the time, and thankfully it's sort of, I think it's about 15 years later, so I think we're fine. But yeah, that was really how it started.
Awesome. So going on from where you started to where you are now, what's the day-to-day sort of life like for a director?
It's really different. I mean, it's partly why I really like it, is because it is really different. Um, my main job, it's running a company. The main thing is you need to have more coming in than you do going out. And that sort of quite simply, whatever it takes to do that is what I do. We have 9 staff altogether, full-time staff. So my job is to effectively make sure that we've got enough coming in to cover that, cover the office, cover everything that comes with it. So whether that be looking for funding for the original IP that we're looking to create, be that animation, film, TV, game, I'll do that. Sometimes that's literally just going to networking events. It's just schmoozing with people. It's just getting to know people, meeting more people. Sometimes that's putting tenders together. Sometimes it's putting paperwork together. Working on a slate of different ideas so that when we go to market, you don't tend to just put one idea and say, this is our one idea, can we get the funding for it? People tend to go to funders with a slate of ideas and say, do any of these interest you? You sort of have a better chance if one of them does. So we're constantly just creating new things, and so I'm driving a lot of that as well. And then part of it's just the sort of day-to-day admin of it. It's doing the company accounts, making sure that all of the contracts are up to date, and making sure our staff are happy, and making sure that our clients are happy. So there's sort of every day is really different.
So do you sort of hands-on manage your employees, or do you get someone else to do that for you?
So I sort of I work pretty closely with the employees. We have a studio manager who sort of is working with them, day to day, and sort of is closer than I am to them. But I tend to try and speak to each employee a few times a week, and make sure that I know what everyone is doing and working on, and have a sort of a good idea on what projects are going, how they're going. And we use Slack to communicate in house, and so even if I'm not in the office and I'm running around or whatever, typically I'll be able to sort of go onto the different channels and just see where people are, what people have been doing, and just catch up. So very often I'll just sit, I'll come home, it'd be like, let's say midnight or something, and I'll be sat there with my iPad just running through the day and just seeing what everyone's been up to. So I just put my notes on things, and so when they come in the morning, they'll see my notes and see my thoughts, and typically just sort of saying, love it, continue on, sort of thing. So yeah, so that's sort of typically how that works.
Awesome. So you said that you hired a managing director, or sorry, I forgot what the job title.
A studio manager.
Studio manager, that's the one.
Yeah, I don't want to replace myself.
What do you think makes a great leader?
It's difficult to say, because I think there are different styles of leadership. And I think I've got a very particular style of leadership that I like, in that, Carse Waterman is a company that we like to say is pretty level. It's up, and we don't want our staff to feel like there's a hierarchy within the company. There has to be sometimes, but that is for special occasions. For the most part, everyone is responsible for their own stuff, and as long as a member of staff commits to, sort of agrees when we're working on a project, whatever it be, to they're going to deliver this for this amount of time, whenever, we sort of leave them to it. And the more staff are willing to take responsibility for what they're doing, the happier we are not to micromanage them and sort of get too involved in what they're up to. But it all comes down to communication, and for our staff, we try and make it as easy as possible for them to communicate, so that they don't need myself or our studio manager to really get involved. And it's only if clients have come back and said, oh, they're not happy with this, or can we change this, or can we do that, that sort of they'll get prodded to sort of change stuff. But typically, I'm someone of the mindset that we want to treat all of our staff like I would want to be treated, like my business partner Gary would want to be treated. So Gary and I, we lead by example. We're not, we don't show up late to the office, and we don't take liberties with things, and because we wouldn't want our staff to do that. And I think that's, whereas I think certain bosses will themselves above their staff and work in different ways, and we find that can sometimes create a frustration between the staff, and so I think for us, we like everyone on the same level, and it's worked really well for us. We have a very good staff retention rate over the 14, 15 years we've been running. We've only ever lost 3 members of staff, full-time staff. So we're doing something right. A lot of our staff, our staff have been with us for 12, 8 years, 6 years. So people tend to sort of come to us and stick with us.
Yeah, that's sort of the mentality that we have at Snappy Gurus, is that everyone in our team is level and has the same amount of sort of say in the projects that we work on. And I think that's really important for communication and social skills and stuff like that. But in terms of social skills, how much do you think that affects the sort of workplace?
I think it's really important. I think it's I'm someone that struggled with it initially. I'm someone that through my school years I was kicked out of 2 schools. I was they sort of at some point I was sort of labelled as dyslexic, at some point dyspraxic, and they sort of never quite knew quite what was going on with me, and I'm certainly whatever it is, I certainly think differently, and I there are times where I can myself be socially awkward, and so I think as a company director, that's been a real challenge for me to run the company and make sure that you were making people feel comfortable. But I think with our staff, I think that we sort of like to sort of look at everyone as a bit of a family. And I'm sure it sounds like the same as you guys as well. Is that it's if you're doing it right, you can have that family. And there has been occasions where people have joined, and that hasn't always been the case, and that can be really difficult, particularly for them, because it's just not what they're interested in. They're sort of very happy to sort of have a 9 to 5 and then go home afterwards, and that's absolutely up to them. In our office we have a sort of a 70-seater cinema, and at the end of the day, sometimes the PlayStation 5 will get plugged into it and they'll play Rocket League or whatever, and that's part of the culture of the office, is that people want to come in, they want to spend time in the office, and they want to have fun, but that isn't for everyone, and there's nothing to force them to get involved, but certainly as a majority, people actually are quite close. They'll come in, they'll talk about random stuff. This morning I came into the office and they were talking about a game called Stray, which I'm sure most people on this call will know about. They're talking about Stray, and we're going to order that for the office, and so we'll have sort of a session of that sort of at some point. And we try and sort of do things to keep people interested and excited, and just create stuff that's happening. Because I think one of the challenges, and I'm sure you'll find this as well, is being in Stoke. As much as I absolutely love Stoke, I think it's it's given our company so many opportunities. There's not always a large amount of opportunity to sort of go out and do the sort of nerdier side of things that our staff want to do. And so because we've got that private screening room in our office, it allows us to sort of to host and arrange more of those events on site, and allows us to sort of, I guess, make up for some of the sort of geographical challenges that Stoke has for now, which hopefully will sort of change over the next few years, and it looks like they're starting to.
Yeah. In terms of all of these social skills and meshing with each other, how much does networking take effect when you're starting out a company?
I would say it's everything, and it's the thing that so many people get wrong when they set up companies, and we got it wrong when we first started. It's lots of people come out of university with a good ability to do 3D work. It might not be the whole pipeline, but some people will come out of university, or even not university. They might just follow tutorials on YouTube or whatever. But people will get to a point where they're like, I can try and make a living from this, and they start posting a few things on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, trying to sort of just drum up a bit of interest, and they get frustrated that no one's coming to them, and there is almost this idea that there is this magic way that the internet will put them in contact with a load of people. And don't get me wrong, it absolutely can happen. It can happen for some. And that's, and that's sort of, people can be lucky. I mean, hey, look, in my first year of university, I got to do a Prodigy music video. So, luck can certainly work for you. But, after that, it was very much hard graft. It was very much a case of, Gary or I, and that's why it's quite nice to have a partnership, because there's sort of, you can split responsibilities. But Gary or I would go to the opening of a letter. We would go to anything. And it's one of those things where you can't afford to be snobby. You can't afford to make any judgments. It's literally one of those things where whatever event you're going to, you have no idea where the opportunities are going to come from. And there's Steve Jobs did a commencement speech at, I think it was Princeton in sort of 2000s, where he used this example of as your company grows, you can never see how the dots will join. Looking forward, looking back, it's always so clear. And I think that as our company, that's been entirely true. The idea of certain projects we took on thinking, oh, this is going to be a really good project. They're not paying us, but we're going to get to put our name on this project. It's a really big project, and hopefully you'll get more work from it. And in actual fact, nothing came from it, and it was really frustrating because we did it for free with the hope that more work would come out, and actually nothing did. Whereas we took on a project, we've taken other projects on that we thought, oh well, it sounds really boring, but they're paying us a bit of money for it, you might as well get it done. And suddenly that project unlocked massive projects for us. We put our show reel on random websites we'd never heard before, and just found that actually we got more work from that than we did from our show reel on YouTube. It's just, you just have to throw as much out there as possible, and that goes with networking. Do not look down on anything, and any opportunity you have to meet people, do it, because people get frustrated that within our industry it's all about who you know, and they're right, it is about who you know, but there's a really easy solution to that. Know more people. And the only way you do that is by leaving your bedroom, going to events, and just really, being a bit of a networking maniac, and just going to as much as you can. And that's really been a big part of our success as a company. And we found that we've gone to networking events and walk away and think, oh, that wasn't very good. And then 6 years later, someone gets back to us and says, oh, I met you at that event 6 years ago. I've got 20 grand. Can you do an animation for us? And we'd be like, brilliant. It took a while, but it paid off in the end. And sometimes these things aren't instant. Sometimes you've got to be that you're playing the long game here, and that you're going to these events and something might not come from it, but instantly. But you've got to believe that something will come from it in the long run. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it?
Yeah, that's something that's resounded between you and a lot of our other speakers, is that like networking is the key to getting high up in the industry. And I think it's really important that everyone really knows that, because a lot of people think they can because of course you can get a job from just doing what you're doing and applying and stuff, but the best way is always going to be to network, sort of thing.
Absolutely, and I think and part of that is self-belief. I think, and that's and I think it certainly didn't come naturally to me, the idea of believing in myself. I think for our industry, I think it's there are typically a running theme of people don't typically have self-belief. Our industry is quite shy and introverted, and but I think that's something that I've had to learn and fight over the years, and particularly when I'm sort of working internationally in America, and you sort of get used to the fact that people will just come up to you and start having conversations, and I'm just very British about it, going, sorry, hello, how can I? And that can be that can be really weird, and I think I've definitely learned to just throw myself into it and just sort of go along with it. And sometimes, as I say, sort of my my sort of social awkwardness can create a bit of anxiety in these situations, but like overall you sort of get used to it, you get used to control it. And but yeah, no, it's been absolutely crucial for us. And like we just I've been really lucky that one of the things that hasn't ever held me back is passion. And I think when you start your career with this idea of, I'm in my first year of university and I've just done a music video for The Prodigy, what it does is it shows you that anything can happen. And we saw that, and we absolutely didn't deserve it. It came out of absolute nowhere. Like, it was literally like nothing made sense about that situation, but yet it happened. And I think once we saw that this industry is so much about making your own opportunities, we just sort of went for it and continued to just go for it and dream big. And I remember a few years ago, and we were then, and we still are, a small animation studio in Stoke. We have 9 members of staff. We are by no means in the big leagues. We're ambitious. We're a small, feisty animation studio that's been running for a while, but we are small, and we're happy with that. But one of the things that we found is that actually we're quite unique in the fact that we are in Stoke, and there's very few people that actually have the courage to try and do something like what I've done and what you've done, is set something up like this in Stoke, where it's completely new. And a few years ago, I sort of been, I was networking all over the place and meeting people here, there, and everywhere, and then I suddenly got a email out of the blue saying that there's an organisation that's sort of been doing a bit of work around inclusion and diversity within the animation, visual effects, and games industries. The sort of members include also some of the sort of people working on it are studios like Framestore, Double Negative, Industrial Light and Magic, Epic Games, and they said they're starting to sort of put events on and stuff in London, and they're looking to grow it regionally. And they're looking for someone who can sit on the board as a regional head of regional. And through the networking I'd done, they came to me as that head of regional. And I was sat on the board with some of the biggest companies in the country, or the world. And there was epic imposter syndrome, in the sense of like, how am I sat here with Industrial Light and Magic and Framestore, and we're all having a conversation about how we can improve opportunities in Stoke. And it was one of those things where, I'm still on the board. I still work with them, and we've had, since then we've had, Industrial Light and Magic have been up to Stoke 3 times. We get on very well with them, and we're involved in trying to sort of convince some of the companies to try and move and create smaller offices here in Stoke as well. Because if you don't ask, you don't get. And we really want to try and grow our sector. And I wasn't really aware of what you guys were doing, but I'm super interested to hear more about it as well. And I see myself as a bit of a local advocate for the city. And certainly being in that position of on the board of Access VFX, it's really allowed me to sort of push the talent in the city and get it recognised by some of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah. Before we move on to audience questions, I have one last question for you, and it is, if you could say anything to someone trying to break out into the industry, what would you say?
If I had one word of advice. I think one of the things that we see a lot that is quite frustrating is that a lot of people were still coming to our industry through university. It was relevant if people are going through apprenticeships, but a lot of people were still coming into sort of animation VFX games through university, and people will do the modules university asked them to do, and then they will build their first showreel based on what the university has asked them to do. But what you want to do is, by the time you get to the end of those 3 years at university, you want to have a showreel made of nothing from university, because your university work is what you're learning with, and every university does the same modules. And when we're looking through the showreels and the CVs, like, we know what we're looking at, and we know that we're looking at a module that you did for university. One of the things that's really important for people that want to work in our industry is passion. And the way that we judge passion is we want to see what are you doing outside of what the university is making you do, what the requirements that you need to do. And so for us, if we see that people are creating their own content outside of what university are asking them to do, if we see that they've got an Instagram that is just they're posting loads of stuff on, if they're doing you've seen someone sort of like, oh, every day I model something new just to try and improve my modeling, or I do every month I do the 11-second club for animation, or I created this gaming mechanic trying to do this, and I created this gaming mechanic trying to do this. And we like to see people that play around with it, explore, and show that, because I think that's something that you cannot teach in people. That's something that is just an attitude. And when you're hiring, you need to be able to understand how to look for that. And it's really difficult to see any of that if all you've done is the work that university told you to do, because that doesn't show passion. That just showed someone that sort of followed the framework of what university asked you to do. And to us, that isn't enough. You need to love this, and you need to show that this is something that you enjoy working on in day out, because ultimately it can get quite crushing at times. I mean, we don't sort of make any of our staff work 9 to 5, and for us it's really important that our staff enjoy what we do, but we can't help what clients turn around and say about people's work, and we need to make sure that whatever happens, even if the feedback is redo everything, our member of staff goes, that's frustrating, but okay, that's fine. And so and that is passion that pushes people to do that. And so I think for me, it would be that it's think about how you're showing your passion through the work you're sending to companies.
Awesome. So yeah, now we'll move on to audience questions. So if everyone wants to put their questions down, we'll start with Lauren, who is another guru.
Okay.
She put, this sounds like how we are starting. How did you cope with managing university and starting a company? What led you to what led to you deciding to start a company? Sorry.
Yeah, so the juggling of the university was a weird one, and Gary and I had a slight disagreement on how to do it. Um, I was sort of keen to continue on with university because I didn't know where it was going to end. We had an opportunity, as I said. We weren't afraid to work, and we worked many sleepless nights on various projects. But we just didn't know when university ended what would happen. We certainly had no idea that we would be running the company 10 years later. And so I was keen to just continue doing university and juggling the work that we were doing at Carse Waterman. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of sleepless nights. That was ultimately it. We worked on a lot of stuff, and there was one occasion where we were working with an advertising agency called McCann, Australia, and they were completely different time zone. And so, we ended up having to just change the time zone we were working in to work on their time zone, whilst being in a student house in Stoke. And so, I ended up actually sort of having to go to the hospital briefly because I actually burnt myself out. And I sort of was a bit silly, pushed myself too far. But we really pushed ourselves hard to make sure that I was able to do my university work and the company work. Gary was less fussed about the university work. I think he was. I think he felt like he sort of was experiencing and living the life that the university was always going to. The point of the university was to get to this point, and so he didn't need to. He didn't need to sort of work as hard for the university staff, and it ended up sort of not being wrong. We sort of by the time we got out of university, we had more experience than most of the lecturers who were teaching us. And so it was it ended up being being sort of, I guess, not as important. But I think that the one thing that Gary and I do feel whilst we were at university, the thing that we quite liked is that it did allow us to focus some time on creating projects that we wanted to create. And so when we're in our third year and we had to deliver a final major project, both Gary and I did a final major project because we wanted to create a project that we wanted, rather than someone else's advert or someone else's video or wherever it is. And so we sort of used university work eventually. We figured out to use that university work as a bit of a creative sort of outburst, because we weren't able to do that in the corporate work we were doing, and I think we still needed to get some of that out of our system. And I certainly, for a few years after, continued sort of trying to find little projects here and there when time allows, so that I could sort of just create the things I wanted to create before work. Carse Waterman sort of took my time away from it, and I just didn't get the time to do it anymore. But yeah, that was that really.
Awesome. Do you have any advice for people trying to start a business during uni? How do you take advantage of the careers team, as we haven't had much support?
I think the thing about university, which is really that sort of really benefited us, is that you're surrounded by other people learning different things. And I think that one of our biggest strengths in the early days was, if we didn't know how to do something, the chances are someone else would. And there were various projects that came along that we were like, we need to do this. Actually, this person will be really good. And so for the first 5 years of our company, we were less of a traditional company with full-time members of staff. And Gary and I weren't taking a salary until we left university. But we were more of a collective, a collaborative collective. And when projects came in, we would look for the people that could potentially get involved, and so there's various people along the way, along the journey of Carse Waterman, that sort of gained various bits of experience working on various projects with us as we learned. And so there are people working in ILM and Aardman and Double Negative that ended up getting their first bit of industry experience with us when we were making it up as we went along, way back when. But it was one of those things where for us it was very much a case of just making it up as we went along, and getting as many people who were in our course to sort of almost come along for the ride with us, and try and share the opportunities and share the experience, and try and help everyone get a cool CV and show reel. And it's not for everyone. Some people will be like, nah, I don't want that. And it's sort of their prerogative, and it's their win or loss. But for us, that was the big win. We also used some of the university gear. They let us use sort of computers and cameras and whatever it is we needed as well, which was good. I think from the careers team side of things, we didn't really have much to do with them. I think it was very much a case of we made it up as we went along, and what we didn't know, we looked online to find out. And I guess the other area of resource that we had is the local Staffordshire Chamber of Commerce offered us a free mentor to just advise us a bit with the more sort of complex sides that we didn't really understand, like the sort of tax side and the accountancy side and stuff. And they helped us understand sort of like some of the areas that we just had no idea about, so that we could sort of run things all above board and not make any silly mistakes to begin with.
The Chainsaw Maniac, but does anyone know of any short film contests coming up? Do you know of any?
Short film contests?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know that over the years, whenever we've created any short films, we on is it Film Freeway, I think it is, and it's quite a good website to just go and look at what's coming up, and they'll have everything sort of by dates, so you can sort of see what film festivals or animation festivals take your fancy. So I think Film Freeway is where I would probably look. I'm not sure if the British Animation Awards have any competitions at the moment. I'm not sure. But as far as we're concerned, when it came to short films and trying to sort of find some bits of funding for short films, it was really difficult. And I think there are things that exist. I think the BFI have a small pot to fund talent, and I think you can look at the BFI network to see if they've got anything open at the moment. But we typically we were never successful at finding those pots of money. I think we were we didn't learn how to access that sort of finance until much later on, and at that point, we were sort of quite happy to sort of work on projects with our clients, and it sort of never became as much of a requirement for us. But I would say maybe the BFI is probably the place to look if you're actually looking for funding for this stuff.
William Port, is the weight of a portfolio higher than a degree? If not, why?
Absolutely. I think the portfolio is everything. I mean, the amount of times I've seen CVs come in with someone that's gone through university to sort of work in animation, VFX, or games, and they've got a first, and I look at their portfolio, and they don't know what topology is, and they want to be a modeler. It's the university system doesn't particularly work for creative industries, and there are definitely pros, and I'm not someone that will ever entirely say don't go to university, because I think that there are some great pros of going to university, and obviously Carse Waterman wouldn't exist if I didn't go to one. So I feel like everyone will have different ways of doing it, but we are all about portfolio. We're very keen to push people to say, hey, look, if you don't want to go to university and if you're able to manage your own time, just go onto YouTube and download Blender and just teach yourself, because ultimately it's available. If you want to get into the gaming side of things, Unity's available, Unreal Engine's available. Just start making stuff. We've seen people who have never used an animation software get to a point of a third year university student in about 6 months. I think the portfolio is absolutely the most important thing, and I wouldn't put any real substantial weight into what you get at university, because ultimately, if you've got the best showreel ever, then it's not like anyone is going to turn around and go, do you know what, brilliant, you can see you're really, really good, but you only got 2-1. It's just not the way it works. Our industry is underskilled, which effectively means people are desperate for talent. People can't find enough talent, and they don't have the luxury of being picky. So if you're good, you're good. It's absolutely about just making sure that you've got a good showreel.
And I think this is the last question, but what were some of the biggest problems you faced during the early stages of your company, and how did you resolve them?
Biggest problems of our company. I think so. One of the biggest challenges for Carse Waterman. So when we were at university, I mentioned that I was the Pixar fanboy, Gary was the Aardman fanboy, and we saw animation as an entertainment tool. And when it came to selling what we did, we were like, we do animation. That's what we do. People will come to us and say, hey, I want to buy some animation. And we really struggled to connect with people, because what we found, and I think it's slightly changed, but it's still the case for a lot of companies, is that people don't come to us because they want animation. People come to us because they want communication. Animation is a communication tool. And if I say to someone, hey, do you want animation? They'll be like, no, why do I need animation? If I say to them, hey, do you want a really, really concise and powerful communication tool to communicate whatever you're looking for, they'll be like, okay, then I'm interested. And so what we learned is we learned how, even though we would see it as animation and we create animation, we learned that actually for most people that's not the product we're creating. The fact it's animation is neither here or there to them. They just want the best communication tool for their company, and we believe it's animation. And so I think for us, when we suddenly realized that what we are selling is not the thing that we think we're selling, and we suddenly started going down that rabbit hole of how to communicate, best, the best methods of communication, thinking about the psychology of what we're doing, rather than just that end product of, I'm making an animation. And it's the same with games. It's why on earth is someone going to invest in a game? And typically it's not just a case of they're looking for a fun idea to make a game. They want to have a reason to invest in it. And so you've got to think a bit more, from the perspective of someone who might not really understand the industry at all. Why would someone invest in a game? And I do think that has changed a bit. And certainly more companies are coming to us saying, hey, I'd like some animation. But it certainly wasn't the case when we started. I think many people saw Carse Waterman as an animation studio with just me and Gary sort of drawing pictures of Mickey Mouse in our bedrooms, and it took us many years to get away from that vision that I think people had of us, which wasn't true. You know, we were working on incredibly high-end things. We were working with companies like the United Nations and the NHS. We were sort of, you know, helping communicate, you know, how people go through cancer treatments, and we were helping create sort of videos about different LGBT rights and things like that. You know, we were communicating really important issues, but it took a while for people to understand what's that got to do with a company that you know, building work, or what's that got to do with a company that works with medicine. And you know, it's the same with games. We see the potential of games is massive for our clients. You know, the fact that people can have such interactive content is massive, and there's huge opportunities there. And so we're going through that process now of how can we sell games to our clients, and it's you know, and it is really just about wrapping it correctly.